Denisha Franklin stood alone in her corner office late one evening, the city lights beyond her window twinkling like distant stars. She had built Franklin Facilities Inc. from a small cleaning crew into a nationwide company each year. She had watched her vision grow larger than she ever imagined, her heart filled with pride when she remembered starting out with just 2 mops and a single van. Now she oversaw hundreds of employees, dozens of regional managers, and contracts with major corporations. Yet this night, pride felt distant. A dull knot of worry gathered in her chest earlier that week. Denisha had received a stack of human resources reports. The pages were thick with surveys from employees, exit interviews, and notes from anonymous suggestion boxes. Many messages praised the company's mission and Denisha's leadership. But tucked among the kind words were troubling whispers. Workers spoke of managers who ignored them, impossible deadlines that left staff exhausted, and favoritism that left loyal employees feeling invisible. Some had even left the company altogether, swearing they would never return. She poured herself a cup of green tea and sat at her desk, scrolling through comments on her tablet. One employee had written, "I feel like I'm invisible here. Management never listens." Another wrote, "They treat us like machines, not people." Denisha's heart ached when she read, "I joined because I believed in this company. Now, I'm just counting down the days until I can leave." These words cut deeper than she expected. She had always believed that respect and kindness were at the core of her business. How had things gone so wrong? In the days that followed, Denisha spoke to her executive team. She asked tough questions. She listened as they offered explanations about rapid growth and whether training programs needed improvement. They pointed to market pressures, tight budgets, and the challenge of hiring enough people to keep up. Denisha heard their words, but felt they only scratched the surface. The problem seemed deeper, hidden beneath layers of reports and polite answers. She decided she needed to see the truth for herself. No more boardroom presentations or polished summaries. She needed to walk the halls, listen to people's real voices, and watch what happened when no one expected her to be the boss. The idea grew in her mind until she could almost taste it. An undercover visit. Dressed as one of her cleaning staff, Denisha remembered the very first day she had put on a uniform. She had been fresh out of college, naive and hopeful. She had scrubbed floors herself, driven her own van, and greeted each client with a smile. She had felt connected to every corner of the business. Over the years, her days had filled with meetings, strategy sessions, and press events. She missed the honest work and the simple satisfaction of a job well done. But more than that, she missed truly knowing what was happening on the ground. She spent the next morning in her closet, pulling out a plain janitor's uniform she had kept from an old promotional event. It was a soft navy blue shirt and matching pants, with a small Franklin Facilities logo on the pocket. She also found a pair of sturdy, slip-resistant shoes in the storage closet. Her heart pounded as she laid out the uniform on her bed. This was real. She would become Dana, a new hire eager to prove herself. Denisha played Dana in her mind over and over. She practiced a simple introduction. "Hi, I'm Dana. I start today." She imagined the surprised look on the security guard's face when she gave him a plain ID badge. She pictured herself pushing a cleaning cart down icy marble hallways, pretending not to know whose office she passed. She even rehearsed keeping her back straight and her head down when managers walked by, so they would never guess her real identity. That night, after everyone else had left the building, Denisha slipped out of her dress and into Dana's uniform. She looked at herself in the mirror, not as CEO of a thriving company, but as a humble janitor. There was something both thrilling and terrifying about it. She took a deep breath and pinned a generic name tag onto her shirt. Her reflection stared back at her with dark eyes full of determination. When dawn arrived, Denisha drove her own car to the main office building. She did not use the executive parking garage. Instead, she found a spot in the crowded public lot. Feeling a sting of irony when she saw her company's logo on a sign nearby, she tucked her purse under her seat and grabbed the cleaning cart she had borrowed from the headquarters supply closet. With a mop in her hand and a bucket rolling beside her, she pushed the cart toward the front doors. At the security desk, a tall guard glanced up at her badge and nodded. "Dana, right? Welcome aboard," he said, sliding her ID through a card reader. Denisha nodded back, keeping her voice soft. "Thank you," she said, and tried not to let her heart race. She watched as the guard turned away, assuming she was just another new hire. No one saw the CEO on her knees, scrubbing tile for the first time in years. She started in the lobby, sweeping stray papers into her dustpan and wiping smudges from the glass doors. People hurried past, absorbed in their own tasks. A receptionist glanced at her cart and frowned, muttering under her breath about busy work slowing her down. Denisha felt a pang of sympathy for the woman. She tried to smile. "Have a good morning," she said, and the receptionist barely looked up. Moving into the corridors, Denisha heard bits of conversation. A manager walked past, talking on the phone in a harsh tone. "If that report isn't on my desk by noon, you're in trouble," he snapped. Denisha's fingers tightened around the mop handle. These were the voices she needed to hear. She pushed her cart quietly into a supply closet, paused her work, and listened through the half-open door. Voices argued about missed deadlines and unfair schedules. One junior staff member pleaded, "I'm doing my best, but with 3 huge projects due, I can't keep up." The manager barked, "Then you should have thought about that before you took this role." Denisha felt heat in her cheeks. This was not the company culture she had envisioned. She took a simple mental note of the manager's name badge, Phillips. She moved on to the break room next. 2 employees sat at a small table, leaning over their phones instead of chatting. Denisha leaned against the counter, pretending to fill her bucket. One said, "I think they only hired her because she's cheap labor." The other laughed, "Right? No training, no respect. They just care about cutting costs." Denisha closed her eyes for a moment. These were honest words, spilled when people thought no leaders were listening. All around her, Denisha saw the signs of neglect. Conference rooms with half-empty water pitchers, whiteboards filled with last week's scribbles, stacks of filing boxes blocking doorways. She passed a neglected coat closet where someone had dumped old uniforms. She thought of her early days, when she had polished every boardroom table herself, and felt a pang of guilt that things had slipped so far. Late that morning, after scrubbing the tile in front of the executive elevators, Denisha paused to straighten her back. She looked up at the towering glass doors that led to the top floors. No one greeted her. No one offered thanks for her work. She realized she had been invisible, just as many employees had felt. She took a steadying breath and pushed the cart back toward her starting point, feeling a mix of resolve and sadness. During her break, Denisha peeked into the HR office, where the head of HR was reviewing a screen full of survey responses. The HR lead looked up, saw Dana, and waved dismissively. "Just doing your rounds?" she asked. Denisha nodded. She wanted to ask questions, but knew the conversation would draw attention. She simply offered a polite, "I'm learning the ropes," and backed away. By noon, Denisha felt as if she had run a marathon on her knees. Her muscles ached, her uniform felt heavy, and her skin itched where the cheap fabric rubbed her. Yet in every ache she felt the truth of her company's state. The polished image of success had concealed pain beneath the surface. She realized that if she returned to her corner office without action, the same issues would fester and grow. As she pushed her cart back into the supply closet, Denisha made a silent promise to herself and to everyone she had overheard. She would not let the voices of her employees be ignored any longer. She would not allow management to treat people like disposable parts. She would reveal herself, face the problem head-on, and clean house in the only way that mattered by demanding respect, transparency, and real change. With that thought warming her heart, she slipped out of Dana's uniform, hung it on the closet hook, and set her sights on the next steps she would take to reclaim the soul of her company. Denisha woke before sunrise the next day, her heart beating like a drum in her chest. She lay in bed for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the city waking up. Rays of orange light peeked through her curtains. She slipped quietly from her bed so as not to wake her spouse and moved to the closet. There, she found the navy blue janitor's uniform waiting on its hanger. She took a deep breath, peeled back the hanger, and let the fabric slide over her shoulders. The shirt felt coarse against her skin, nothing like the fine silks and satins she normally wore. She buttoned it slowly, each click echoing in the silent room. She tugged on the matching pants and laced up the black slip-resistant shoes. She looked at herself in the full-length mirror and wondered if she would recognize the woman staring back. She pinned on the simple name badge that read Dana Johnson. It covered her heart where her own name tag would have fit. She tucked her long hair into a plain cap, hiding the sleek style she usually showed off. She padded into the bathroom, brushed her teeth, and studied her face in the mirror. Her brown eyes looked tired but determined. She washed her face with cold water, pressing the small sink to remind herself how real this experiment felt. She thought about the surveys and the whispered complaints she had read. She remembered the frowns and the sarcastic mutters. Her company was her life, and now she would see it through the eyes of someone who had no power. She filled a small paper cup with water and washed away the last traces of CEO Denisha. She left her purse locked in a drawer at home. She wanted nothing to identify her later. She tucked the paper cup into a pocket for later, pulled her phone out of sight, and closed the bathroom door softly. Before she left, she whispered to her reflection, "See the truth." She drove to the office in her own car, but she did not use the private garage. She parked in the crowded lot open to everyone. As she walked toward the building, the early morning chill brushed her cheeks. She clutched the mop handle at her side like a lifeline. In her other hand she rolled a small bucket filled with water, the wheels creaking as they turned. At the main entrance, she swiped the janitor badge through the reader. A green light flashed, and the doors slid open. With a gentle swoosh, she took a steadying breath and stepped inside. The lobby was quiet, lit by the soft glow of overhead lights. A few cleaning crews were already at work. One older man in a similar uniform glanced at Denisha, then nodded politely before returning to his task. Denisha nodded back, hoping to blend in. She found an empty corner by a row of potted plants and set down her bucket. She filled the mop with water, wrung it out carefully, and began sweeping the floor in long, even strokes. She watched people pass by. Some gave her a quick smile. Others looked straight ahead, lost in their own worries. A woman emerged from an elevator and rushed to her desk, balancing a stack of files. Denisha saw the stress in her shoulders. She wanted to tell her that it was going to be okay. Instead, she continued mopping, making sure to clean every streak. After a few minutes, a security guard walked by and stopped. He straightened his uniform and peered at her badge. "Dana, right?" he asked in a low voice. Denisha looked up and smiled. "Yes, sir," she said softly. The guard nodded and walked on. Denisha wondered if he knew how close she was to the truth. She returned to her work, noticing a small crack in the marble floor and making a mental note to mention it later. When she could, she moved on to the hallway that led to the regional manager's offices. As she pushed her cart down the corridor, she heard raised voices leaking from behind a closed door. She paused, pretending to check her bucket. The voices were angry and tense. One was the tone of a manager, the other was a junior employee. She inched closer, balancing the mop on the cart so it would not tilt. Through the crack under the door she caught scraps of the conversation. "I told you that was impossible," the manager snapped. "You should have thought of the deadline before you signed up for it." The junior employee's voice shook as she answered, "I'm doing my best. I stayed until midnight, but there were too many tasks." Denisha's heart sank. She remembered days when she would stay late herself, but managers had cheered her on then. This tone was cold, harsh, unkind. She scrubbed a spot on the floor harder, as if scouring away the tension in the air. She moved on without knocking. She passed another door that read Human Resources. Inside, she saw a woman sitting at a desk. The HR lead scrolled through responses on her computer screen. A small stack of papers sat beside her. The lead sighed, rubbed her forehead, and eyed the door. Denisha stepped back into the hallway, watching the HR lead yawn and rub her eyes in exhaustion. No one had taught her to care enough about these people's needs. Denisha pressed the mop against the floor again, feeling the ache in her back. She told herself this was worth it. Further down, Denisha found the break room. She parked her cart in the corner and leaned against the counter, pretending to rest. Two employees sat at a small table, sipping coffee and scrolling on their phones. Denisha watched them trade glances, then heard one say, "I heard they only give the good shifts to their favorites." The other nodded. "Yeah, I've been here for 5 years and never got a full morning shift. They say they care about seniority, but it's who you know." Denisha closed her eyes for a moment, letting their words sink in. The company she had built from the ground up now felt cold and unfair. She tapped her foot lightly and saw a small paper cup on the counter. She picked it up, filled it with water from the dispenser, and pretended to take a drink. She offered them a shy smile. "Morning," she said softly, and they barely looked up before returning to their phones. Denisha drank the water slowly, tasting the cheap plastic against her lips. She set the cup down and pushed the cart onward. She spent the rest of the morning cleaning bathrooms, polishing door handles, and emptying trash bins. Each task gave her a closer look at daily routines. She noticed how the bathrooms were cleaned unevenly, how some stalls had broken locks, and how there were no air fresheners to keep the hallway smelling fresh. She saw coffee stains left on meeting room tables, sticky fingerprints on glass panels, and dusty shelves and seldom-used corners. By mid-morning, her body felt heavy, her muscles ached, and her uniform clung uncomfortably to her skin. But her spirit felt clearer than ever. She understood the small things that affected morale, the ways people felt ignored, and how managers had turned day-to-day tasks into burdens. She saw confusion in the eyes of a new hire who couldn't find supplies. She noticed the frustration of a receptionist juggling phone calls and emails without any help. She felt their loneliness, their stress, and their quiet anger. At noon, Denisha found a quiet supply closet to rest. She sat on an old stool and closed her eyes. She counted her breaths and let the silence fill her mind. She thought about the next steps she would take. She thought about the management team and how soon she would confront them. She thought about how to rebuild trust without tearing down the company she felt a mix of fear and excitement. When she stood up, she straightened her back. She wiped sweat from her brow and picked up the mop bucket. She rolled it out of the closet, ready to continue her shift. She knew that each floor she cleaned brought her closer to the moment she would reveal herself. She felt a spark of hope. The ground might be uneven and the windows might be dusty, but she was ready to shine a light on the problems and sweep them away. Denisha pushed the cart down the wide corridor, toward the executive elevators, her uniform brushing the walls gently. With each turn, she looked up at the sleek doors and thought about the day's end, when she would change back into her CEO's suit and face the management team. For now, she was Dana, the janitor, but she was also Denisha, the leader determined to make things right. She took a steadying breath, lifted her chin, and moved forward, one sweep at a time. Denisha had just finished emptying a row of trash bins on the 6th floor. When she heard the echo of hurried footsteps, she paused, mop in hand, and turned toward a pair of polished mahogany doors. Through the small window she saw two men in crisp suits speaking in hushed but urgent tones. Their body language told her they felt powerful here. She tucked her mop behind her cart and listened. One man said, "We need those numbers by tomorrow morning. If the East Coast team doesn't deliver, we lose the Jackson account." The other replied, "Tell them to work late. We've got to hit revenue targets." Denisha's heart constricted. She remembered long nights solving problems herself, rallying her small team over pizza boxes and borrowed conference rooms. She knew what it was like to push for results and still care for each person. Now these managers ordered overworked staff around with no thought for their well-being. No wonder people felt invisible. She reached for her mop bucket to steady herself, then remembered to stay Dana. She pretended to tie and untie the mop string, keeping her eyes downward. The men left, their polished shoes clicking against the marble. Denisha watched them disappear around the corner. When she felt safe, she leaned closer to the door and pressed her ear against the cold metal. Inside she heard typing, the soft click of computer keys, and the distant hum of machines. She noted the sense of urgency, never calm, never patient. She moved on, pushing her cart into a smaller hallway lined with framed awards and certificates. Years ago, those honors had represented her hard work and the dedication of every person in the company. Now they felt like dusty props for a show. She passed a plaque named Best Workplace 2023 and wondered how a workplace could be the best. When many felt unheard, her footsteps slowed as she thought about who had earned those accolades and how they might feel now. She gently polished the frame, feeling a mixture of pride and sadness. In a narrow corner by the stairwell, she noticed a young woman with a stack of binders. The binders teetered in her arms, and her cheeks were flushed from rushing. Denisha looked up from her bucket and offered, "Do you need help?" The woman glanced at her badge, then back at the binders. "Oh, thank you," she said quietly. Denisha reached out and took half the binders, letting the woman relax for a moment. As they walked together to a nearby office, the woman said, "I've only been here 3 weeks, and already I'm hitting walls. No one shows me where supplies are. No one tells me how to format these reports." Denisha guided her to a supply closet and pointed out folders, labels, and where extra pens were kept. The young woman's eyes brightened. "I wish someone had told me this on day one," she said with a shy smile. Denisha nodded, heart warmed by the small connection. She pushed her cart onward, thinking how little training and kindness cost, yet how much it meant. She rounded a corner and nearly bumped into the head of IT, who was pulling cables behind a server rack. The flickering lights of the machines cast shadows across his worried face. He muttered to himself, "If the server goes down, half the building loses email." He didn't notice the cleaning cart until Denisha cleared her throat softly. He jumped and almost dropped the cable. "Sorry," she said gently. "Let me move my cart." He paused, looked at her badge, then at her face. For a moment, Denisha thought he might say something sharp. Instead, he sighed and said, "I'm just tired. We're short-staffed, and these emergency fixes keep coming." He pointed to a tangle of wires and explained the problem in simple terms. Denisha listened, nodding. She thought of how her managers never came down to see the real work behind the screens. She asked, "Is there anything I can do?" The IT lead hesitated, then said, "If you could let facilities know we need more cooling fans, that would help." Denisha said she would and made a mental note. She thanked him, picked up her cart, and walked away with a new understanding of how small problems could ripple into big troubles. By mid-afternoon, Denisha's uniform was damp with sweat. Her back ached from bending and twisting, but her mind buzzed with the stories she had gathered. She moved through conference rooms where people crowded around laptops, unpaid overtime written in the lines on their faces. She slipped into a manager's office empty except for an old coffee mug on the corner of the desk. She read the faint lipstick ring on its rim and imagined who had used it last. She saw a sticky note on the monitor. "Don't forget to approve Dana's timesheet." Her heart leapt as she realized her fake identity had already filtered into the system. She realized that even a lowly janitor had to fight for respect. She pressed her palm against the desk, took a slow breath, and let go of the moment. She could do this. She had to. Next, she found herself standing outside the executive suites on the 10th floor. Polished brass nameplates lined the hallway. She spotted one that read Senior Vice President Operations. She pressed her ear to the door and heard laughter, and easy, confident laughter. She peeked through the door's window and saw a circle of managers leaning back in their leather chairs, toasting coffee mugs like fine crystal. Their faces shone with pride. One man lifted his mug and declared, "To beating last quarter's numbers even if we have to push our people to the brink." Another laughed and raised his cup. Denisha's jaw tightened. They celebrated profit over people. They celebrated power. She straightened her shoulders. They would soon learn what celebration felt like when respect and honesty guided the toast. She returned to the stairwell, choosing not to use the elevator. The steps creaked under her weight, reminding her of the firm ground beneath her. She reached the rooftop terrace, where contractors had built a garden for employees. But the soil was dry. The plants wilted. A maintenance worker knelt by a plant, asking a colleague for a wrench. The colleague shrugged and walked away. Denisha knelt beside the worker and quietly tied back stray wires on the irrigation system. She smiled and asked, "Do you know how to adjust the water flow?" The worker explained, and she listened, helping him fix the leak. Droplets of water landed on her uniform, but she felt refreshed. She thought, if they cared about this garden, they would care about their people. When she returned inside, she realized only minutes remained until her shift ended. She moved quickly through the halls, giving each floor one last sweep. She cleared a spill in the reception area, wiped fingerprints from glass, and straightened the chairs in a waiting room. With each task, she imagined the pride her employees once felt in their work. She felt a spark of hope that it could return. Finally, she reached the supply closet once more. She set down her mop, wrung out the bucket, and tucked the uniform on its hook. She paused, breathing deeply, and let her mind rest on what she had learned. She saw a path forward: confront the management, reveal the truth, and rebuild. She changed into her own clothes, smoothing invisible creases from her jacket as she stood in front of the mirror. Denisha looked at her reflection and saw a woman who had walked miles in another's shoes, literally and figuratively. She saw strength tempered with compassion, courage guided by empathy. With that, she picked up her phone and called the conference room. Her voice was calm but firm. "Book an all-hands meeting for 1 hour from now. Executive conference room A." She heard the assistant's quick reply. She ended the call and gathered her notes. In her pocket was the slip of paper with the manager's names. She had written down Phillips, Morrison, Langford, and the others. She carried the weight of her decisions like a torch in the darkness. Soon, everyone would gather, and the truth would shine. Until then, Denisha took one last look at the polished floor she had scrubbed, whispered, "Thank you," and walked away, ready to lead the house cleaning that truly mattered. Denisha stood outside the sleek conference room door, her heart pounding with a mix of nerves and determination. She smoothed the front of her tailored suit and ran a hand through her hair. Moments ago, she had changed from Dana back into Denisha Franklin, CEO of Franklin Facilities Inc. She carried a stack of files and notes she had gathered over 2 days undercover. She paused, breathing deeply, and pressed the button to enter. As the door opened, managers from every department looked up in surprise. The polished wood table was crowded with faces Denisha had only ever seen through video calls or board reports. They shifted in their chairs, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. Some tried polite smiles, others stared in shock. Denisha set her files on the table and faced them all with calm authority. The hum of the air conditioner filled the momentary silence as she gave each person a steady look. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Denisha began, her voice measured but firm. She saw some eyebrows lift when she spoke without her usual warm greeting. "I have walked these halls as Dana, your colleague, a janitor who cleans floors and empty trash bins. I saw what happens when managers neglect the very people who make this company run." The room grew quiet, and Denisha felt every eye on her. She opened the first folder, revealing notes and quotes she had recorded. She read aloud simple, honest phrases. "If that report isn't on my desk by noon, you're in trouble. They treat us like machines, not people. Figure it out or you're fired." The words echoed in the room, heavy and real. Heads sank and eyes darted. Denisha placed photos beside the notes. Neglected conference rooms, half-washed windows, dusty break rooms. She laid spreadsheets showing rising turnover and falling morale. She spoke without anger or shame, only facts. "These are the voices of our employees. They felt invisible, unheard, and overworked. They stayed late without support. They watched resources go to favorites, while many struggled." She paused to let the weight settle. Some managers glanced at one another, guilt flashing in their eyes. Denisha folded her hands on the table and continued, "I gave you the tools to lead, to support, and to inspire. Instead, you chose to chase numbers without care for human cost. This cannot stand." She looked directly at each manager in turn. Phillips, Morrison, Langford, and the rest. Their faces turned pale as they realized their actions had been laid bare. Denisha's voice stayed calm, but her eyes shone with resolve. "I have decided to take immediate action, effective today. I am ending your terms as managers here. Our people deserve leaders who respect them, who listen, and who build together." A gasp rose around the table. Papers rustled as shocked managers tried to speak, but Denisha raised a hand. "I will give each of you a chance to collect your things and meet with HR for severance and support in finding your next role," she said softly. "But I will not allow this company's values to be sacrificed for empty targets. I will rebuild our leadership team with integrity and compassion." A heavy silence settled. Then, one by one, managers lowered their heads. Acceptance mingled with regret. Denisha watched their expressions change from defiance to remorse. After the meeting, the managers filed out, escorted by HR representatives. Denisha remained in the room, gathering her files. She felt a pang of sadness for the relationships lost, but she knew it was necessary. She ran her fingers over the smooth surface of the table, remembering nights she had huddled with her first team over takeout meals, solving problems together with laughter and respect. She vowed to bring back that spirit. Within the hour, Denisha called all employees to another meeting in the main hall. Word spread quickly. The CEO was speaking. Employees filled the seats, murmuring with curiosity and hope. Denisha stepped onto the small stage, greeted by a ripple of applause and stunned faces. She smiled gently, her voice carrying across the room. "Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you for your hard work and dedication. Over the past days, I walked among you as a member of the cleaning crew. I heard your voices and saw your struggles." The crowd grew still, eyes shining. She shared the steps she had taken, the changes she planned, and the new values she wanted to instill: respect, transparency, and teamwork. She announced listening sessions open to all, mentorship programs for frontline staff, and a clear path for promotion based on merit and integrity. She invited volunteers to help redesign the break rooms and input into training programs. Every word was simple, honest, and inclusive. As she spoke, she saw relief and excitement bloom on faces. People nodded, smiled, and even wiped away tears of gratitude. After the meeting, employees lined up to thank her. A receptionist shook her hand and whispered, "I never thought I'd be heard." A junior analyst said, "Thank you for caring." Denisha listened to each story, offering sincere thanks. She walked through the corridors with them, noticing the small changes she could make: a fresh coat of paint here, new supplies there. She vowed to stay visible, to keep listening, and to act quickly. In the days that followed, Denisha worked with HR to promote trustworthy employees into leadership roles. She held workshops on positive management and empathy. She reviewed every project deadline with a focus on realistic timelines and proper support. She replaced broken bathroom locks, fixed the irrigation on the rooftop garden, and ordered new coffee makers for the break rooms. Each simple act showed her commitment. 6 weeks later, Denisha sat in her corner office, looking out at the city skyline. HR reports showed a dramatic increase in morale and productivity. Turnover rates had fallen. Emails flooded her inbox with praise and thanks, yet she knew the work was not done. She reached for her phone and sent an email inviting everyone to a monthly town hall because she believed change required continuous effort and open dialogue. She leaned back, letting a smile warm her face. She remembered Dana's uniform hanging in the supply closet, a symbol of the truth she had uncovered. She felt pride and relief that the real Franklin Facilities Inc. had emerged, a company where every person mattered. Denisha whispered, "We're just getting started," and turned her gaze back to the bustling office below, ready to lead with the integrity and compassion that had guided her from the very beginning. Denisha woke early the next morning. Before the sun touched the sky, she made herself a simple breakfast of oatmeal and berries, then sat at her kitchen table. As she stirred the oats, her mind wandered to the changes she had made. She thought of the faces in the break room, smiling as they poured fresh coffee. She remembered the young intern who now led a small team, glowing with pride in her new role. These memories made Denisha's heart lift. After breakfast, Denisha dressed in a soft blue blouse and dark slacks. She chose comfortable shoes, knowing she would walk the halls all day. She left her phone at home and drove to the office, parking again in the public lot. As she walked toward the building, she noticed a fresh coat of paint on the walls. The lobby looked brighter, friendlier. A new sign read, "Your voice matters," in warm letters. Denisha smiled, proud of the small but meaningful changes. Inside, she greeted the security guard at the desk. "Good morning," she said softly. The guard looked up and returned her smile. "Morning, Denisha. The place feels different already." Denisha nodded. "It does," she replied quietly. She picked up a cleaning cart parked nearby, this time just for show, and wheeled it into the corridor, enjoying the illusion of being Dana one more time, if only for a moment. As she passed the first break room, she saw a group of employees chatting around a small table. Fresh fruit sat in a bowl at the center, a new perk she had approved. One woman waved and called out, "Good morning, Denisha. Thanks for the berries." Denisha laughed. "You're welcome," she said, and kept walking, letting them enjoy her small gift. She headed to the conference room where new managers had their first training session. The room buzzed with energy as first-line staff people she had met undercover now led workshops on respect and listening. Denisha paused at the door and watched. A newly promoted team leader, Marcus, spoke with confidence about setting clear goals and giving feedback kindly. His peers nodded along, taking notes. Denisha felt tears prick her eyes. Marcus had been a janitor when she first went undercover. Now he embraced leadership with humility and care. She slipped into the back of the room, listening as Marcus described how he still cleaned his own office space regularly to stay grounded. He told the group, "When I tidy my desk, I remember this company is more than a job. It's our home for much of the day." The crowd chuckled, but their smiles were genuine. They clapped when he finished. Denisha tapped Marcus on the shoulder and whispered, "Thank you for leading us so well." Marcus beamed. "I learned from the best," he said softly. After the session, Denisha invited the group to join her for a quick coffee in the cafeteria. She led them down wide hallways now dotted with art created by employees, paintings of corporate life, photos of team events, a collage of smiling faces. The walls told the story of a company that cared. In the cafeteria, tables had fresh flowers and clean tablecloths. A simple sign by the coffee machine read, "Compliments of the CEO." As they drank coffee, Denisha asked each person to share one idea for continued improvement. Ideas flew. Quieter spaces for private calls, monthly potlucks, to build community, better lighting in the stairwells. Denisha listened and took notes. She promised to act on each suggestion. She asked them to form a volunteer committee to help with small projects. They agreed eagerly. Later, Denisha moved on to her old corner office, but she stopped on each floor to say hello. She helped a new employee find a stapler. She opened a window for fresh air. She told the security guard he was doing a great job. Everywhere she went, people greeted her by name. She felt a warm glow in her chest. This was the company she had dreamed of, a place where respect flowed from top to bottom. In her office, she reviewed reports from HR. The data showed that turnover had dropped drastically. Employee satisfaction scores were at record highs. Client feedback praised the smooth operations and happy staff. Denisha felt relief and excitement. She knew these numbers reflected real people with real stories. She took out a file marked future projects and flipped through pages of plans for improved training, mentorship programs, and community outreach. One page proposed a company-wide day of service, where employees volunteered at local schools and shelters. Another suggested a quarterly newsletter featuring employee achievements and stories. Denisha smiled widely. She approved each idea, imagining how it would strengthen the sense of belonging. In the afternoon, she walked to the rooftop garden. The plants had recovered, green and lush under the summer sun. She saw a team of volunteers pulling weeds and planting new flowers. They waved when they saw her. Denisha joined them, helping to carry a sack of soil. She knelt beside them, loosening the earth around a small rose bush. A volunteer named Anita said, "This garden feels like ours now. Thank you for inviting us to help." Denisha patted Anita's shoulder. "Thank you for caring," she replied. After the gardening session, Denisha invited everyone to gather on the rooftop terrace. She brought out cold lemonade for all. They sat in folding chairs arranged in a circle. Denisha stood in the center. Holding a pitcher, she poured a glass and raised it. "To you," she said, her voice full of warmth. "You are the heart of this company. Your care for this garden and for each other shows me the way forward." They cheered, clinking their cups softly. For a moment, the city below seemed to hush, as if holding its breath to watch this simple celebration. As the sun dipped lower, Denisha lingered on the terrace. She watched employees laugh and chat, their faces lit by the golden light. She remembered why she had gone undercover, to reconnect with the people who made Franklin Facilities Inc. more than a business. She thought of the lessons she had learned, lessons about humility, empathy, and the power of small acts. When the rooftop gathering ended, Denisha walked back to her office alone. She passed through quiet corridors, the lights dimming for evening. She reached her office and opened the blinds. To see the city lights blinking on, she sat at her desk and pulled out a small notebook, the one she had used as Dana, to jot down overheard quotes. She flipped through pages filled with messy writing. She paused on a note that read, "Figure it out or you're fired." She smiled at how far things had come since that harsh moment. She tore out the page and dropped it into a recycling bin. There was no room for that language here. Denisha then took a fresh page and wrote her own words. "Listen first. Lead with kindness. Build together." She placed the note in a small wooden frame and set it on her desk. Whenever she looked up, she would see the promise she had made to herself and to her team. Before leaving for the night, Denisha checked her email one last time. She saw messages from employees sharing how they felt proud to work here now. She saw a photo of Marcus leading a team meeting in a bright new office. She saw an invitation to join the volunteer committee next week, to paint murals in the parking garage. Each email ended with a simple "thank you, CEO," or "grateful for your leadership." Denisha shut down her computer and stood. She walked to the door and paused, placing her hand on the frame of the window. She looked out at the city's skyline, breathing deeply. She knew every day would bring new challenges, but she felt ready. She had seen the truth on the ground and acted with courage and care. She had shown her team that their work mattered, and she had learned that being a true leader meant staying connected to every person, no matter their role. She turned off the lights and locked the door behind her. As she walked down the corridor, she whispered to herself, "We're in this together." Outside, the night air was cool and clear. Denisha walked to her car, her steps light. She knew tomorrow she would return and begin again with the same heart, the same promise, and the same commitment to a company built on respect and trust. Checked.